Hi,
Hello. Hi. Welcome.
how's everyone doing?
Thumbs
Very
up.
good.
Doing good today. And feeling very good to have Kari Eckert be our special guest today. Kari is the founder of Robbie's Hope Foundation. And the Talking Back to Suicide podcast is all about, well, helping to prevent suicide, right? Here in the United States and internationally, as suicide is a worldwide devastation, and we need to do something about it. So, Kari, could you perhaps introduce yourself and start your story wherever you'd like to begin?
Certainly. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. Sadly, I know suicide personally. I lost my 15-year-old son, Robbie, on October 11th, 2018. Robbie died by suicide, and as his mother, it was very unexpected, as many suicides are. He was a sophomore in high school. And my husband and I quickly learned that suicide is the leading cause of death of Robbie's age group in the state of Colorado. And it was put upon our heart very quickly that we needed to do something about that. And what we did is we went to Robbie's friends and we said, "What's going on? What are adults missing?" And we learned a lot. And that was the catalyst for our organization called Robbie's Hope. Our messaging is to teach young people it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay and to always have hope. Hold on, pain ends. Our organization is really about empowering the youth with their voice.
When you reached out to the youth, what kind of sharing did they do with you?
We learned that they were aware that young people were struggling, but oftentimes they were just going to their peers. They weren't getting adults involved. And I don't think that's any different than when I was in high school 30 years ago. But with the issues that young people are facing today, they seem to be heavier. And it's just really important to get that adult involved. You don't have to handle everything on your own. We learned at the time of Robbie's death that as a freshman in high school, two other young people had gone to Robbie with their suicidal ideation. And as a mom, that was a lot to process. I was blessed. I was a stay at home mom for 12 years. I was with Robbie every single day. And the fact that he carried that alone as a 14-year-old, that's too much. Even myself, now being a trusted adult in my community, if a young person tells me that they're struggling, that they're considering hurting themselves, I talk to other adults. I don't try to carry it alone. We have to carry things together, not
Yes.
try to process just solo.
Sometimes suicide can be an impulsive act. Sometimes there could be planned, and probably there can be a combination of the two. A plan that may not have reached fruition, and then there's the impulsive trigger. Um, if you feel comfortable, could you say a little bit more of your understanding of what was happening for Robbie?
Certainly, my husband and I certainly we tried to figure out the why, if you will. Did we miss signs? Did we miss clues? And you're absolutely right that a person can live with suicidal ideation for quite a long period of time, or a person can have the ability to complete suicide. My background is I'm a psychologist, or by that's my bachelor's degree. And I was just at a conference last week. The suicidal mind is it's very actually brief, and that's a good thing. That's why suicide is preventable. But when a person's in that state, it can be hard. That's why we talk about ahead of time looking for the signs and the symptoms of potentially a crisis. Um, Robbie was 15 years old. Developmentally, his actions and his behaviors, they seemed very, very appropriate. Did he try to ask for help? I don't think we overlooked anything. He seemed to be thriving. He seemed to be very happy. He always had a smile on his face, never said anything to anyone. Um, I've let go of trying to find out that why. I don't. spend a lot of energy on that. I think it would not serve me 6.5 years later. And I let go of that why pretty quickly. When I have that opportunity to have that answer to that why, I feel like I'll be with my maker and I'll be with Robbie and I won't need the answer to that why. And I just instead I want to help young people and I want to thrive myself. And I couldn't do that if I still just tried to focus on that.
Yes, of course. I understand. Um, could you say something, if you could, about how his friends responded to his loss? What was the response of the school? And your thoughts about what schools can do preventively and postventively?
Certainly. His friends were very, very surprised. They didn't understand a lot of questions of how could someone like Robbie die by suicide because Robbie looked like everything was okay. School seemed easy for him. His extracurriculars, he was a double athlete. They seemed like he really truly just was the kid that others went to. His school, I very much remember my husband and I, we wanted to be truthful and honest from the very, very beginning. And most schools send out a letter to the parents, to the students, saying that a student has died. And we were it was very important to us that we said the why, how Robbie died, that Robbie died by suicide. And I remember there was a little bit of reluctance from his principal, the person who made that communication, but he chose to be with us on board from the very beginning. And that honesty, I feel like just served our community very, very well. And I'm really proud of that, that we responded with truth, that we didn't try to cover up, because I think there's more understanding and there's more prevention when you operate that way versus just, a child's here one day and gone the next. Like kids know more than that. And we know the truth. So dealing with that truth, I couldn't live with the fact if we tried to lie and say something else happened. Um, I believe there's prevention in that. And we brought resources to the school, to the greater community. The counselors were there and we talked with kids like, how are you feeling? How does this affect you? The school continued to recognize Robbie, his seat in the classroom for the remainder of the school year. He was honored at graduation 2 years later. I'm very, very grateful for that. I know a lot of schools don't choose to operate that way, but I feel like there is just prevention in operating that way.
That the whole silent shame and stigma surrounding mental health crises, mental illness, and suicide just needs to be stopped. Right, it absolutely stops. So your fierce belief in the truth, right? The truth will set us free, and the truth can keep us alive. Yeah.
Agreed.
I have thoughts, Kino?
Okay, I know it's 6 years later, but my condolences, sorry, about Robbie.
Thank you.
There seems to be this common trend where it's always the youth that are fine to the outside world. They seem fine, they smiling, they, portraying that they enjoy life and all is good. In your professional opinion, why is it those ones that are actually suffering the most? Like, what are they going through? Like, psychologically, emotionally, to be fine with everyone else, but inside they're hurting, and then the result is suicide.
That's tough. Yeah, I'm fine. Sometimes that's my automatic response when somebody asks me how I am. To be able to be vulnerable is hard. It's uncomfortable. It's not the norm in our society. Instead, we have to be tough. I live in the state of Colorado. We pull up our bootstraps. We put on that mask and just fight through it versus being real with our humanness, who we are and what we're dealing with, what kind of stresses we have, the things that we're worried about. Robbie was a sophomore in high school, and I know that even in middle school, he was asked, what are you going to be? Who are you going to be? And the pressures that our young people have, they're really, really great. I the anxiety that we have about the future. We don't talk about that. We don't allow people to talk about that, and we need to change that. It's okay to be a little anxious about how you're gonna turn out, who you're gonna be. Goodness, and we don't always have to have that figured out, but instead, we young people, we just constantly are the pressures of, are you gonna be a success? Are you gonna be the person that you think you're gonna be? That's a lot.
Yeah, it was actually 2 weeks ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, Diana, that we had the discussion about pressure. Pressure that we get from our family, pressure that we get from our friends, the expectations, especially when you're in school, just to do well and get your act together and grow up and start thinking about your future. But at 15, 16, I mean, even 18 or 20, it's okay if you don't have it all figured out, you know.
And you can't have it all figured out because
Not even
because life is a process.
exactly. I mean, even if you're at 40, it doesn't mean that you have it all figured out. So, what messages, would you advise that, we push out there to just tell, teachers, principals, parents, look, just chill out and learn to understand and, hear what your child is saying right now, to understand that they're under a lot of pressure and to just give them that time to grow and find themselves.
I think what might be helpful, because I am very fortunate to spend a lot of time with young people, and because I often wear the lens of a mother, is to be able to just sit with a young person when they are talking about those things that they're nervous about, that they are anxious about, the things in the future that they don't have figured out. I always say that we have two ears and we have one mouth. When a young person confides in you, especially if it's your child, often as a parent, we want to solve the issue that they're bringing to you versus just sitting with them. And they want to figure out the answer themselves. They don't want us to figure it out. They just want to process and go through the steps to get to that next choice that they're going to make, that thing that they believe in themselves, that they're just a little bit apprehensive about. And just like, we live in a society where our communication is very, very different than when I grew up. So much of it is really nonverbal versus verbal, being heard, the opportunity to say your thoughts out loud. And that's when you get to process differently inside of our brain. But just let a young person, and it's not even just a young person, your partner, you mentioned the age 40, 50, like, things can change. We have anxieties, we have things that we don't believe in, and we want to process our thoughts. Just hear a person out. It's okay to sit in that uncomfortable silence and just be.
Yeah. And what's the common trend that you find with the youth, in 2025, like negative emotions? What's the common trends?
I don't think, they're probably not that different than what you and I dealt with when we were youth. But for some reason, we're trying to label them differently right now. I think they're the same human emotions. There's a lot of blame on social media. There's a lot of blame on our phones, at our screen time. Um, but really, it's about our humanness, and our lack of connection is really, really big. And that's not just for youth. Does social media and screen time contribute to that? Absolutely. But humans,
Definitely.
we're
Yeah.
designed for connection. We don't have that connection on the same level today that we had 30 years ago. And I think that's what we need to strive to get back to, that opportunity to be heard, to hear other people, to believe in other people, to have that vulnerability.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
that
yeah.
I'm thinking too, Kari, that what you said about that connection through shared vulnerability. And not just connecting with successes or
Ah,
likes or exterior acclaim in some way, but
yeah,
just to be with someone like, I'm a human, you're a human, this is what's going on for me, what's going on for you. And also that idea of that it's okay, and it's more than okay, to ask for help That's what we're designed to do, to help each other. And that's how that relationship, that attachment is formed. And yet I feel that so often in the intensity of despair or emotional pain, that that idea of I should reach out for help. Now's the time to reach out for help. That sometimes we don't reach out for help.
I've been there. I know that I will be there again, unfortunately. And in those moments, like our brain's ability to just try to process alone, to feel alone, versus just like trying to break that thought and say, hey, like, wait a minute. I know I am not the only one with this feeling. And I know there are other people who want to be there for me, that are there for me, but I have to ask. I have to be the one to say, hey, like, I am having a really tough time right now. Can you just hear me out? Why that's hard to do is it's real. It is very hard to do. But by nature, when you do that, just take that first step to say, hey, like, can you sit with me? Can you hear me out? Do you have 5 minutes? Like, can we have a conversation? Usually that's as brief as it takes. It doesn't take long to
Yes.
get you probably all of us have a few friends that we can make that phone call to, or can it be done via text? Like, I'm struggling right now.
As you were speaking, an idea popped in my head. And I was thinking of, as infants, right? Infancy, we're crying a lot and we're crying out. I don't think we have a conscious idea of I'm asking for help, but a natural phenomenon is to cry, right? And then, in order, of course, to soothe that baby, the caregiver, the parent, the mother, the father, the grandmother, the older sister or brother, someone is picking up that baby and comforting and trying to figure out what's wrong, right? And I was thinking that would be really an amazing um, ad in terms of suicide prevention. Linking, that the crying infant, because that the depth of, I think, suicidal upset can almost, perhaps, on a psychological level, bring us back to an infant, I don't know what to do kind of state. And it's at that very point when we need to connect.
And not letting, like, I think as humans, and because we can learn things when we're not in crisis, learning that you don't have to go to that
Exactly.
crisis point where you are crying out. I think of human development so much, like as a mom. Like, I helped Robbie name his emotions, like when he was crying or when he was hungry, how he felt that way, when he was upset, when he, like, I helped him name all of those things by the things that he showed me, which were nonverbal or sometimes verbal and sometimes just by his behaviors. And then I think something sadly happens when a child is like in late elementary school, is suddenly they have to know how to control those behaviors and those emotions, and they can't, like, we don't always allow ourselves to name our feelings anymore, versus like, I'm anxious. It doesn't mean that I have anxiety, but I am anxious. Or right now I feel really sad and I feel really alone, and can I name that to someone that I trust, even as a 50-plus-year-old, like, woman that looks like I'm okay and looks like I have it together all of the time. I don't have it together all the time. And naming it and talking about it when it's not at crisis is when I can handle it and when I can process it at a much better state.
Sometimes too, with we can name that emotion, and yet there's nuances to that emotion, or we can say, or I think there's can be overuse of some of those words. For example, I am thinking back when I was practicing child psychiatry. And getting to know the person in front of me, the youth in front of me, or the young adult person might say that they're feeling depressed, right? And then it becomes, well, tell me more about what depressed means to you, right? What are the feelings? What are the circumstances? What are you able to do, not able to do? If depression were a color, what is it? If it was a shape, what is it? Right? To because sometimes, not for everybody, but sometimes we can narrow the understanding of what's going on by just saying, I am this, period. Right? And then it kind of cuts the possibility of, well, are you always feeling that way? Are you always going to feel that way? And what exactly do you mean by that word? Right, almost to make instead of a block of ice, you're turning it back to water again, right? In order for there to be able to have a conversation.
Interesting. Yeah, that we give so much power to those words. And that's not how I feel forever, versus just dealing with it in the moment.
And perhaps too during adolescence, it's interesting because I can remember too when I was a young person, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? Right? And yet, in those younger years, and what the brain doesn't stop. Well, I think the brain continues to develop, but in terms of maximum develop, we're talking about what, into the early 20s.
I think like 22 and 25 for female and male.
But here we are talking about what do you want to be when you grow up, and yet the young person's sense of time is not the same sense of time as it is when we get older, right?
Yeah, I think about that as a mom, that he's just 15 years old. He's 15 years, 8 months, and 22 days old. Like, whatever in that moment felt so heavy to him, that's tough, that's hard. Like, when I have the opportunity to talk to young people, learning to hold on that life perspective. Like, I've had moments, I've never been suicidal, but I've had really hard moments trying to process how the fact that I am a mom and I've lost a child. And I know will get close to those moments again, but each time it's a little bit, I don't want to use the word easier, maybe that it's different, and I can approach it and I can process and get out of that deep moment in a more responsive, beneficial way to me, because I recognize it.
That holding on, and that's also the name of the Hold On campaign for suicide prevention, related to just what you're saying, that yes, one can have those thoughts. I myself have had those thoughts, and when I was in medical school, acted on those thoughts and had a suicide attempt. And yet, there's the capacity to be able to hold on and not act on that thought. Right? And if we hold on, then we're going to stay alive for another moment. Help can be sought, and life can change. Our feelings can change. Circumstances can change. I want to go back to what you said earlier, Kari, and that is that, yes, suicide can be impulsive, and there can not be a psychiatric illness. Right? There certainly is psychological stress, and there can be circumstances where there was no exterior sign that something was wrong.
Yeah, I think that's a hard thing for loss survivors and just for the general public, especially when we work in the field of prevention. I think we just need to remember that we're humans, and can we prevent everything in every instance? Possibly not, but we can strive for it, and we can educate people and have podcasts like we have here to let people know that help is always available. Asking for help is okay. Taking care of yourself is okay. Learning about this is okay. We really want people to think about their mental health and try to treat it just like physical health. Like, we don't ignore a physical symptom. If I woke up today and felt like something was very off in, say, what part of my body, I'm going to be aware of it and pay attention to it today, tonight, tomorrow, and start to deal with it pretty quickly if it's a physical symptom. But for some reason, when it's a mental health symptom, we kind of have a tendency to ignore versus to process and treat sooner than later. The statistics are pretty startling. People with a mental health condition wait on average a very long time to ask for help. Problems progress.
Yes, they do. They do. What, Kari, do you see as improvements or gains in our suicide prevention efforts?
I think we're making gains. I wake up and do this work every single day. And I am a glass half full type person. I think I have to be able to do this work and talk about suicide on a daily basis. I'm not afraid of it. I think COVID really brought some good light to the fact that we all have mental health, every single one of us. We used to just focus on those that had mental illness. About 20% of our population at some point in their life will have a diagnosable mental illness. And certainly that's not easy, just like having a physical illness. But there's help available, there's treatments available. But we all have mental health, every single one of us. And I think that's what COVID has taught us. The numbers of young people that are having a diagnosable condition of anxiety and depression, usually the two leading causes that lead to suicide, they're on the rise post-COVID. But I think that's because young people are learning that it's okay to ask for help. And I think we'll turn the corner with more time, and that will level out. But I look at that as a good thing, that people are being diagnosed, that they are seeking treatment, that they are getting help. Suicide numbers are they're slow to report. They're not out. It's hard to get to the bottom of really, where are we at? But in a lot of demographics, we're making progress.
In Oregon, in 2022 statistics, suicide was the 10th leading cause of death in the state. In 2023, it's the 8th leading cause of death. So I don't know the answers to that, but in our state, at least, there needs to be more done, more services, more understanding. Yeah.
The research around the statistics and just the research in suicide prevention overall, and it's lagging. The resources for mental health care, and I live in Colorado, we rank in the bottom of access to care. And I think a lot of that is just driven by dollars and the way our medical community, it's not real. That needs to change. If I was diagnosed with breast cancer today from my yearly mammogram, I would probably very quickly know what my course of treatment was going to be. And that's because there's money behind cancer treatment. And that's a beautiful thing. People should not die. I'm 50 years old. I shouldn't die of breast cancer. But when it's a diagnosable mental illness, sadly, practitioners, they don't know what drug to give me, how I'm going to react. The process of getting treatment is really slippery and sticky and not smooth. And comes down to dollars. And It's unfortunate in 2025 that that's what it is.
Number of psychiatric inpatient beds available.
Right. And,
residential treatment, if that might be required.
And a young person, when they went on a 72-hour hold in the past, they used to actually get a little bit of treatment. And now it's just a place to be held until we can get them to a little bit safer spot. Our systems are taxed. It comes to values, really. We talked about the beginning of this podcast. What are we educating young people with? Are we educating them with skills that are going to bring them to that next level of success? Or are we teaching them things that just, I don't know. it's kind of lopsided.
Tina, what are your thoughts about all that we've been talking about?
As a parent, you can never really get over, the loss of a child. But you've channeled your energy into starting great initiatives. Whereas there's parents who couldn't do that. I know of cases where, parents took their own life after they lost the child. What would you tell parents out there who have recently lost a child? They do not know how to cope, and I want, like, if you can answer from like a self-reflection point of view, not necessarily let me ask for help. Like, what did you do for yourself? You can say if you didn't, but did you have any like self-reflective moments by sitting by yourself and saying, let me breathe. What can I do with this now? How can I move forward? That conversation with oneself, which is also so important. It's like between God and yourself.
Excellent question. Such a good question. And I have been asked and have put a lot of thought into that as well. Prior to raising my children, I was a funeral director. So I've approached my loss with a little bit different lens. And I've sat with families, mostly mothers, who are in the very early stages of losing a child. And I absolutely can feel like what they are feeling. I think for myself, I learned early on to be able to trust the process, really to be able to just trust in myself. It's not easy. It takes a lot of time. I hate that. I hate all of that, because logically it often makes sense, but in the heart it doesn't. Like, I just wanted to resist it. Like, I remember at the beginning of my grief journey, I hated the word healing. Like, I did not want to be healed. I was very, very resentful of like any literature that said healed. Like, I felt like if I was healed, that would be somehow like losing my son on another level, like that it wouldn't be respectful to him. At this point, I want to be healed. It's a process. Life is a process. This is part of my life journey. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of patience with myself, patience with others, and a ton of grace, like grace for people who care about you, people who try to help you, try to say the right thing, and it just is not the right thing at that moment, and it's so incredibly hurtful. And a lot of grace for myself, and I don't know, I think if you can come to terms with the fact that your loved one, your child, is at peace. I remember I put a ton of energy. I needed to know that Robbie was okay. I really and I still I find peace with that. Like, Robbie is okay. I am going to be okay. I'm okay today. It's a very, very difficult journey. I will not sugarcoat that in any way. Everyone handles it very, very differently. And I think it's a lifelong journey. Like, I probably have 30 years left on this earth if I'm fortunate. Some days that is way too big of a number to think about. The more I can ground myself today and be okay today and do the things that I need to do to be okay today, the better off I can be. And the more I can help others, the more I can be proud of who I am.
With all you saying, I can tell that, you're a great mother, you're a phenomenal parent. So, like, to listeners, and parents that are listening to the show, don't blame yourself. Will that be like, a good message to push out? Don't blame yourself. Don't sit alone looking in the mirror and thinking he or she did this because I'm a bad parent.
Thank you. I thank you, thank you. Mothering was, and I still, my daughter is 26 in a couple weeks. Probably one of, or the greatest blessing of my life is to be able to be a mom. Yes, don't blame yourself. And to the parents whose children have won't die by suicide, the parents that are trying to learn about suicide prevention, please don't live in fear. Don't live in fear of losing your child to suicide. You can't parent in fear. Educate yourself, be aware, be vulnerable with your child. You can trust the process too. Parenting's really, really hard. It's extremely difficult. It's probably one of the toughest jobs we have. Huge responsibility. Trust yourself, educate yourself, use your intuition, let love guide you. You're going to make some mistakes. No one is perfect. No one's a perfect mom. No one's a perfect dad. Just continue to try to do what's best for your child.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And since you work with youth, if we look at the generations, right? Gen Zs tend to be extremely more emotional. Like you've mentioned social media, and I also blame social media for that because Gen Zs tend to keep comparing themselves to everyone else online. Compared to myself now being a millennial, phones, yes, it was a thing, but social media wasn't as big when I was in high school, for example. It was on me to make something of my life. I didn't have to compare myself to anyone. Like, what can we do, globally to get Gen Zs to, say, look, I'm going to stop comparing myself to everyone else online. Let me focus on me. Let me focus on my strengths. Let me focus on my weaknesses. Because the moment, you don't have much, let's just say you in the middle class of society, then you go online, then you check this guy, he's just gotten a new Ferrari and he's your age. You get depressed about it. And that leads to suicidal thoughts.
You know, I am in my 50s and I still compare myself to others. I think that's a human emotion. I don't want young people to, I think if we can recognize that versus like, and deal with that feeling, like, hey, I have qualities that are worthy as well. I'm not
Yes.
alone. Like when I feel this way or I make that comparison that I'm not good enough, that my body isn't beautiful in the way that other people my age are being, the ability people have to be an influencer today. I think if we can have that conversation and name those feelings and recognize it, that it's not new, like it's just our ability to handle it, like and it's not the blame of young people and their like what we have given them, and it's not unique. Like I do it still and I work in this field. Like it's a human emotion to compare and to want to have better for yourself. That is where we're at as well. Let's be realistic and let's not be fearful of it. Let's name it and not feel alone in it. Like, do you share with the people that you care that, hey, I think that when I see that?
It's also purpose. If we can get the message out there to each person that, look, you have a unique purpose. So there may be a guy online who has just purchased a Ferrari. Do I want a Ferrari in my life one day? Yeah, maybe I do. But how am I going to obtain the Ferrari? Do I want to do it how that guy did it? Or do I want to get that Ferrari doing stuff that I love to do? You know, like that's what I've done for my life as well. Like it's when people go on holiday, for example, right? Let's just say they go to Bali, for whatever reason. And I'm like, do I also want to go to Bali? Yes, I want to go to Bali, but I want to go to Bali with the purpose. I don't just want to go there because someone, went there on a holiday. What purpose am I going to Bali with? Like, that's my sort of mindset. Is it going to be fulfilling for me to go, or am I just running away from my current life? purpose is extremely important. But unfortunately, touching on the educational system at the moment globally, focusing on purpose is not like a topic. It's
Yeah, like you're
not.
not going to work a day in your life if you love what you do. How many people
Yeah,
are going to work every single day because it's what they have to do? Certainly, I mean, we need to teach young people, yeah, you're going to have a job. You're going to have income earnings, to be able to pay all of the different things. Young people are very aware of that. It's a really hard time economically and the pressures. But when you can do things because you're proud of yourself and because it fulfills you, and you're doing it for the betterment of others and yourself, like it takes you to a different level. Absolutely, we aren't teaching young people that. Like, what career are you going to choose? Because we're teaching it for economics, not
yeah.
for fulfillment.
And follow your heart. You know, the youth needs to follow their heart. And just block out all the noise. Of getting judged or what people are going to think. It's like I should feel comfortable if I am, say, 16, 17 years old. I should feel comfortable enough to go to my parents or go to whoever and say, look, I want to be a DJ. I want to be an actor. And we shouldn't laugh when, kids come up and tell us these things. We should actually support their ambition, support the imagination, allow them to have that sort of imagination because anything is possible.
Yeah, we don't live in a real creative world anymore. Diane, you do a lot with art. Like, we don't entertain those conversations. Like, absolutely. Like a DJ? What? Versus, like, tell me about being a DJ. Like, what
Yeah,
interests you in that? Like,
yeah, that's it.
And sometimes it can be sort of all or nothing, meaning, let's say, interest in music, right? That it could be that that person, hopefully with the support of their family and their teachers, that they'll pursue their interest in music and perhaps they'll become a singer or a musician, a music teacher, music therapist. And yet, if that may not turn out, there still can be music in their life, right? So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. I was thinking of what you said before, Kino, about what the heart, right? Following the heart. And I'm all for that. And yet, there's a lot of heartbreak in life. And the heart, maybe the French word for heart. Like, I think the meaning of heart can also be courage. That the broken heart can also heal, or hearts are in a way can be broken. Maybe they're meant to be broken, but as they heal, they can get stronger and they can become more loving. Right? Again, that's something that life is lived forward, but wouldn't it be wonderful in some way if it could be lived backward? Like that knowledge of the older years could be infused in younger hearts and minds. Because sometimes with suicidal thinking, there can be relationship breakups. That could happen in adolescence, that could happen throughout the lifespan. And that can be a trigger to my life is over, right? I can't live without this person. They don't love me anymore, or there was something embarrassing happened. Everybody's talking about me. And then suddenly life is not worth living. And yet it is worth living. And you can get through this. And going back for what you said earlier, Kari, the idea that we're not meant to suffer alone, but right, sharing that pain is so important. Don't do it alone. Let somebody know how bad you're feeling.
absolutely. It's hard. A lot of my very good girlfriends who have beautiful ears to listen to me, they have no idea the feelings that I'm talking about, but I can still process them and I can still share them with them. And that is so like that's not alone, that's together. And like they grow from that experience as well, even though they haven't like had the same experience, the feeling that I'm sharing with them. That's our humanness. Yeah, but that alone part, goodness, it's it's unfortunate, and it's human, but we can learn. Like, am I alone right now? Am I the only one that feels this way? No, other people feel this way too.
Yeah.
I think that's what drew me to poetry, because in poetry you have all the human emotions, right? And let's say you don't have or don't feel that you can speak to someone else directly, but in the emotion of poetry, you can find a friend, right? Reading the poetry, writing your own poetry, sharing the poetry. And sometimes in poetry groups, um, there could be a rule about the group that unless I say this is about me, right? Unless I declare this is autobiographical, this is just, a poem that I'm writing, right?
Not
So I
necessarily
think
about
that
me.
that release in the release should not be the final release, which is I'm not alive anymore. Release it another way, which could be prayer, family, friend, taking a nap, listening to music, drawing a picture, saying this too will pass, take a shower, right? As long as you hold on.
Breath work is a beautiful thing. It's such a skill that everyone can do, and no one around you knows that you're doing it, and gives your brain an opportunity to just stop that thought process. Like, it's difficult for our brain to hold multiple thoughts at the same time. We think we're really capable of multitasking. You can break that thought process. Like, I'm not going to feed that thought anymore, and I'm going to do that by taking some deep box breaths, or like changing. I'm going to listen to some music, I'm going to do something different.
Could you explain what box breathing is?
I'm not a very it's hard for me, that's why I try to do it.
Yeah.
It's like visualization of your breathing, and breathing in for 4 seconds and holding it for the next 4 seconds, and then exhaling for 4 seconds and pausing before you start the process again. I like to do like more, just like, I live in Colorado and there's a lot of mountains, and taking a deep breath up using my hand and outlining, breathing in, holding, exhaling, pausing. And just that, it just gives your brain enough of a time to just reset. I often can't think about what I was thinking about prior to needing to do that exercise.
Yeah.
May is coming up, right? And May is designated, mental health awareness, month, although every day is mental health awareness month. But
Agreed.
to your knowledge, what's happening in your state or through your foundation related to that month?
We try to do mental health awareness day every single day, and just teaching different good, positive coping mechanisms, awareness, the ability for people to talk about this, that they aren't alone. Um, it's certainly helping broadcast what other organizations are doing, like, because what works for me might not work for you, Diane. And, like, it's about, and what works for me today might not work for me in 2 weeks. Like, it's changing. And so we have to build like really big toolboxes for young people, for all people. This isn't just about young people. And just the awareness. Like, I love that we have May Mental Health Awareness Month, and that September is Suicide Prevention Month. Like, both of those things should be every day, but the fact that we have them and that we're making progress is a great thing.
And I saw that Robbie's Hope is having a gala coming up. Could you say something about that?
We have what's called the Evening of Hope. Every single April, we have to raise money to do this good work. We provide resources to young people, to educators, to parents, to coaches. There's a handbook that we physically mail. And so we had to do a gala to help pay for that. We also just released the Hall of Personal Expression. It's an opportunity for young people to, a lot of schools, sadly, in our country, don't have outlets for kids, education classes for young people to express themselves artistically. So we have that as well. And everything is available on our website, robbies-hope.com.
Kari, I've been thinking of something you shared earlier, and that was, I think, also prompted by Kino's question to you about you as a mother and your experience with the death of your child. Can you say something about couples, a husband, wife, or partners, right, parenting their child? I'm sure this must be a very emotionally fraught and challenging situation. I would imagine, I don't have statistics on this, but I would imagine that some marriages can't withstand this, and perhaps there's blame and shame, and people separate and divorce, right? Could you say something about that?
Oh, goodness. Yeah. As the statistics of parents who lose a child to suicide of their marriage being sustained long term, it's pretty grim. I very much remember when Robbie died, the evening that he died, I remember looking at my husband and saying, we're doing this together. We will not do this alone. I feel like at the beginning, I was really, really active in the grief journey and doing the work to heal myself that I didn't want to heal myself with. And I feel like I did some of the work for my husband as well, which I'm proud and happy to be able to do. I just, together, that's that we've been talking about being alone. Like, we were happily married. Certainly every marriage has its ups and downs prior to losing Robbie. We've had our ups and downs after losing Robbie. We'll have them again. But, we made a vow, and it's really, really important. My husband works day in and day night with me and Robbie's Hope. You mentioned, a lot of people, they, as parents, they lose themselves to suicide, sadly. A lot of people who start foundations to try to help others, the weight of that is heavy as well. It's not an option for us. It's just, life is worth living. It's worth living together. But it's work too. It's not all perfect. Like, pull up my Instagram, like the comparison factor. You probably think, oh, wow, Kari lives a pretty great life. It's not like that every day. It's real. And it takes continuous effort, and it always will.
Are there resources outside of your own organization that you found helpful to you?
Yes, there is. And I would say they're very more like regional or more geographical to where a person is. And some things work for one person and not for another. I think, and then they work in different stages of grief as well. So be open to trying new things. There's group work. There's loss survivor groups specifically for suicide that works for some people, or it doesn't work for some people. Just be open to doing the work. It's not going to heal on its own. It's you have to put in the effort.
Also earlier, maybe one or two times, Kari, you had used the word like fear. Don't be afraid, or mention fear related to suicidality and all that encompasses. Could you say more about that?
About fear? Gosh, fear is strong. We give fear so much power versus what am I capable of? How am I going to show up today? What can I do? Fear is just something, maybe I avoid it because I am fearful of it. I just don't give it much power. Like, it's just something instead, like, what am I going to bring today to handle today? Um, and I'm not afraid of suicide. Like, I believe suicide is preventable. I very much believe that. Otherwise, I would not be here today. This isn't wouldn't be what I'm dedicating my life to. We can all like be strong. We can all learn to hold on. We can get through hard things, and we do that by learning to ask for help.
I love that. Don't give fear power any sort of power. Whatever you give power in life, is definitely going to come back at you. If you're going to give evil power, evil's going to come back, at you. Let's use like the simplest example possible. Say if you're driving and someone cuts you off, if you shout at that person, or now you like going behind him, you giving that person, that situation, power now to end up in a physical conflict. But if you just like let it be, no one got harmed, the car's never smashed, you just go away, be calm about it, you haven't given any power. So for me, honestly,
You
fear doesn't
become
exist.
empowered, right? By
Yeah,
not giving
fear,
away that power, it can
yeah,
actually strengthen your own power.
yeah. If anyone has asked me, what you think about fear, I'm like, it doesn't exist. I don't bring it into my aura. I don't allow it to come into my aura.
Isn't it a mnemonic? What is it? False, something like false evidence appearing
Appearing
real.
real. Yeah. False
Fear.
evidence appearing real. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. That's what it means. That's what it means. I want to get your opinion on technology at the moment, and I'm going to elaborate and explain how this fits in. At the present moment in time, there is AI companies that can clone a lost one, right? So if I'm a parent and I lose a child, I'm going to pay this AI company. I'm going to feed this company all the videos I've had of my child, pictures, and they are going to clone it. And then I'm going to put on VR goggles and I am going to see my child. Now, in your professional opinion, does this bring any sort of comfort? Because I don't think it does. Is it going to bring comfort? Am I failing to let go of it and just live in reality?
Goodness, you come up with good questions. Can I not be a professional and can I just be a mom and
Yeah,
answer
yeah,
that?
yeah.
Yes.
Like, I don't think I would consider that a healthy coping mechanism. Um, I don't, you know, I think you have to accept that they are gone, and that's a really hard thing to do. But if you can't, that's part of the process. Um, Robbie is still with me, absolutely, and I don't have. I feel him. I get signs from him. Um, but I know that Robbie is in a different place. Like, how far away is it? Like, some days it feels close. Sometimes it feels very far away. Um, I don't. Do I get hate the word triggered? I don't think it's the best choice of words. But do I get triggered by things that put me back at that very first state of losing him? Absolutely. But they feel different now, 6.5 years later. I don't know. I think we've done a lot of conversation today about just that you have to do the work, and it's there is an element of acceptance that you have to accept that they have died. That loved one is not here in the same presence as before. So I don't know that I thought you were going to ask me a question about AI being, there's some really beautiful work being done in AI for preventing mental and treating mental illness. But bringing our loved ones or keeping our loved ones here, I don't know that that's the best use of AI.
Yeah, thank you for that. I love what you said about, Robbie is here. Now let's bring spirituality into the conversation, because When someone leaves, this world, this dimension, it doesn't mean they're gone. We don't just vanish. You know, our loved ones are still here with us day in, day out. We just need to be, open to it that they are here. Talk when you're alone. When you're alone, talk to that person. They're here. So I love that.
Yeah.
And I also believe in that. I believe in that strongly.
Since Kino brought up AI, I wanted to ask you, Kari, about the media in general, right? Whether that's movies, right, advertisements, whatever. How do you think the media can improve itself in terms of mental health, depictions of suicidality or mental illness?
Oh gosh, it's such a powerful tool that the media has, and to use it responsibly, to use the right language, to always provide resources. I think they're doing a much better job of that. To not always jump to conclusions, to tell the person's story. Like these are people, and keeping it real and accurate. The responsibility that they have is really, really great. And as like people who work in prevention, and like when you're trying to use your voice, like it's our responsibility to educate them as well. Like this is how you do it, this trauma sensitive way. This would be helpful. You mentioned like what other resources, there's media resources created just for talking about a death by suicide, and doing the preventative work, continuing to give people the opportunity to share their story as well. Don't be afraid of it. We talked about that word fear. Like the media can be fearful of this issue. There's no reason for that.
Yeah.
Have any more words of wisdom through your own lived experience that you'd like to share?
Oh goodness, I don't know if it's wisdom. It's just me being real. It's I don't know. I sometimes feel such a responsibility to like bring this like positive voice, but it's truly, this is just who Kari is, and I'm it's my lived experience. Do I wish my experience was different? Absolutely. But I do this, to honor myself. I do this to honor Robbie. And I do this because I believe in people, particularly in young people. And I really want them to know that their voice matters, that they're not alone. They're going to get through that hard time. Is it going to be easy? No, it won't be, but it is doable. So just please continue to just take care of yourselves, and just think of like when flight attendants to tell you they, put on that oxygen mask first of your own before you try to help somebody else. That's how we're going to do the best good, is like, let's take care of ourselves and take care of each other together.
It's only
We
moments.
said with great authenticity, right?
Yeah. You keep it real. You do keep it real. And that's what we need more, especially when it comes to all these sensitive topics. Keep it real. And life is a moment, it's all it is. Whatever you may be going through right now, it's only for that moment. That moment shall pass. Then you will enter another moment, and that moment is going to be bright. Before you leave, I just wanted to ask, get your input on being a teenager in school now and choosing your friends wisely, because your friends can also peer pressure you into doing stuff that you don't really want to do, but you want to be a cool kid. And, the situation doesn't end up well, then bullying can happen, and that can also lead to suicide. What can we do better? What can we do better?
Oh, it's so tough. Like friends are so important, especially like when you're in middle school and high school, and the value that we place on relationships, like it doesn't change. Like my friends are so important. But I think when you're in middle school and high school, like it's all you can see. And like making good choices. But oh, that really cool person, like I want to be cool. I want to be friends with them. Goodness, believe in yourself. It's okay to be who you are. Um, Middle school is short. Change is always constant. High school is short. Like that's really hard. I have high schoolers who work for me, and it's so hard for them like to see their seniors in high school. So we're now in March, like May is right there. They it's hard. Change is hard. Relationships are hard. But change is constant. And yeah, try to make good choices. I think, but I don't. Oh, that's a really hard question. I think like treat yourself
Yeah.
as your best friend.
Yeah.
Like truly, like talk to yourself the way you treat your friends. Like that's where we often don't do. We have that negative language towards self. We would never talk to our best friend the way we talk to ourselves. Um, Try to be confident. Confidence doesn't come naturally to most people.
True. True.
That idea of being able to love ourselves, that doesn't have to be like egotistical or selfish. You know, that can be spiritual and meaningful and what we need to do to be loving towards ourselves. Yeah.
It's kind of a learned skill. I like, for me, it has been like I'm very comfortable loving myself and proud of myself. And like, you learn that with experience.
That tenderness that we can give ourselves when we most need it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But bullying, like there's always going to be bullies in life. Like not everybody, like I like to see the positive in people. We don't know what other people are carrying. Like I don't always show up in my spaces in the best way. Like I make mistakes. I'm human. Um, Try to show grace for a person when they, like you mentioned the example of driving when they cut you off. Like that's where like the energy, if we can focus it more there versus it's not somebody else's fault all the time. Sometimes it's just their humanness.
100%. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kari. Right. And could you share the website address again?
Yes, Robbie's ROBBIES HOPE.com. Remember to hold on, pain ends, and it's okay to not be okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kari.
Thank you, Kari.
You're very welcome.